Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Power Rangers Lightning Collection Wave 4. A little bit later on this one than I would have liked, so I apologize, but hopefully I'm on time from here on out with the other waves. So as you can see, this wave includes Mighty Morphin Yellow Ranger Trini, Zeo Ranger 3 Blue Rocky, SPD Red Jack Landers, and Cybervillian Blaze. So a pretty interesting wave. As per usual, we'll take a look at them individually and then a comparison to previous releases of these characters. Let's go ahead and go from left to right and series chronologically. Although I guess like series release chronologically because he's from the future of him. Although we're getting close, Power Ranger. Where's the aliens? I just said Power Ranger singular. Anyway. So, starting with Trini, let's go over the accessories first. She comes with 2 lightning effect parts. They all come with lightning parts because, get it? Lightning collection, guys? Get it? Spoiler alert, this is from Blaze. But she comes with these 2 to be used on the daggers, which is pretty cool. The power daggers, which are obviously in her hand, which I'll show close up in a second. She has the 2 holding weapons hands, which are on her. 2 karate chop hands, which are here, which are not really that blurry in real life. And then you have her alternate human head, which I have to say I think is pretty well done. I think they did a good job on it. I'm happy with it. And now onto the figure itself. I think they did a pretty good job at the head sculpt. I find it to be fairly accurate. You'll see in the comparisons in a few minutes that I think some aspects of the figure art one are a little more accurate to the Japanese one where it's a little more slender, but this one honestly feels more accurate to the US helmet we see in seasons 2 and 3. But either way, I don't have too many problems with it. I find it to be pretty solid. I think they got the colors pretty well. The proportions for the body I think are also pretty well done. The dragon daggers, the power daggers I think are also pretty well detailed. I wish, power daggers have gold for the coin symbol on Sabretooth. I don't remember, but if it did, I wish it did. But I think it's got pretty good details. The articulation is all pretty par for the course for these. So you have a nice little hinge joint here, a little bit clicky, but nice range of motion. Swiveling here, knee joint here, or knee joint. This is the thigh. This is a nice ball joint I meant to say. And then the knee joint here, double knee joint, which is clicky. You have your little ball joint here. Some of the joints in this wave here are really clicky on the feet. So sometimes if you're trying to do a pose where you have the leg out like this one's actually moving pretty well. But some of them are kind of tricky and you have to apply a little bit of force. But I don't know. It's just like this wave, I noticed it a little bit more. And your classic head and neck articulation. No loose joint problems on any of these, so pretty much par for the course, solid articulation. And that articulation is pretty much blanket for all of these. All of them have the same articulation. Way to go, Blaze! You just embarrassed me in front of my friends. But just so I don't have to like spend minutes going over them, obviously these are different molds, these are the male molds, but they're pretty much all the same articulation as I just talked about and as you can expect from Lightning figures. But now let's go ahead and take a look at a comparison to some of the previous Yellow Ranger figure releases. So here we have our Yellow Ranger comparisons. Right here is Lightning Collection, or Lightning Legacy, I always do that. Here's Lightning. This is regular Figure Arts Power Rangers, like Trini-based one. This is the one based on the fact that the male Zeo Ranger is, well, male. This is Boy from Zeo Ranger, the male Figure Arts mold. And this is the MMPR 2010 figure. The only one that I own that I don't have in here is the flip head one, which, as you know, is pretty much a complete difference from this. But the Figure Arts, I think, would be the closest. Actually, this is just like the figure art, almost if it just had a little bit more meat on its bones. Like I said, I think the helmets here might be a little more accurate to the Sentai counterpart, with the having it a little bit more of a slender helmet, whereas the Lightning Collection one, or yeah, Lightning Collection, I got it right, is more like the Season 2 and 3 American helmets. But the figure arts do hold up in some respects too. I think it's really neat to have the male one. I really want to get a male version of the MMPR Yellow Lightning figure so we can do some what-ifs from the Go-Go comic when Jason was that Ranger. Obviously, then you have the little MMPR 2010 one, which is completely different, and then the sort of more death by snoo approach of the Lightning Collection, or the Legacy Collection. God, that's always so hard for me. I'm the dumbest boy in school, which, you know, it doesn't look terrible, but there's a clear difference here, and I think that the Lightning Collection is a strong compromise of most of these. Okay, now we will move on to Zeo Ranger 3 Blue. I think they did a really good job on this figure. This is probably the one I was looking forward to the least. Not that I'm not excited for Zeo figures because we don't get those as often, but it just seemed like the most blah, middle-of-the-road one, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think in particular the head sculpt is well done. If I wanted to nitpick, I could say it's maybe a little bit more rounded than it should be. Maybe it should be a little slender. But for the most part, I think they did a good job on it, and it looks pretty dang accurate. and I think they got the colors right. The gold pops out nicely to the blue. Only real nitpick is these little shoulder joints here. You can definitely see the toyeticness of it with it, like, you know, causing those creases, which is kind of inevitable, but it is one of the more noticeable ones compared to some previous releases. But I think they did a good job on here. This is a very solid, not perfect, but very solid Zeo Ranger 3 blue figure. For his accessories, you do have both his baton sword weapon, which you can see in his hand, which can also go in the holster, as well as the blaster. Unfortunately, you do not have his Zeo Weapon 3, and this doesn't close up or anything like this one's going to transform here. And that is a little bit disappointing. It's definitely nice that it doesn't just come with a closed one like the Lightning Collection one did, but I would have rather, honestly, had the closed up version of this, and then this, and had the actual Zeo Weapon 3, and I'm a little bit disappointed that it doesn't include that, but, you know, it's whatever. Before we take a look at the comparison to previous releases, let's take a look at his accessories. You have his little lightning bit as per usual. You have two closed fists, and on him right now, obviously, you have the holding weapon fists. And then you have his civilian head, if you can call it that. It is, without a doubt, one of the weirdest ones we've ever gotten. I think it's one of the least accurate. I would say right now, honestly, the worst one we've gotten. It's not good. It looks like they mashed up Kid Rocky and regular Rocky's heads and then smushed it around like that scene in Mrs. Doubtfire when they're making the masks. It's just not good. Also, I almost forgot, MMPR Yellow does include the blaster. I just forgot about that. Now I have my main Zeo blue figures. The only one that's not in here, or only ones that I don't have in here, are the flippables, which was much more of a blocky figure, and then sort of the bike figures that came with like the Zeo jet cycles and stuff like that. But these are the primary ones, and I think it's clear that the Lightning Collection one is that's all, folks, is the superior one. I mean, this one, I thought the Lightning Collection, or the Legacy ones, were okay. They weren't bad. It was nice to have actual updates over these figures. But you can see here it's got too much of a bulging, rounded helmet, which is kind of off-putting, even though it was okay. So this is a clear superiority here. But I don't know, this one I think still stands the test. Not really, though. It's got a much darker blue. I don't know if that's the way it always was, or it's just because it's old. But, you know, we've come a long way from this figure from the original Zeo line. Okay, now we move on to SPD Red, and actually let's do the accessories. He does come with a small version of his Morpher, which is nice, and I think they did a pretty good job on it there. Really not too many huge problems on it for what it is. He does have a permanently molded one on the back, though, so you can't store it on the back like other figures. And then you have two extra hands in addition to the holding weapons hands that he has, which are a karate chop hand and one for holding the Morpher, which is neat. You have a blaster effect part for the, well, blasters, and you have his head sculpt, which I think looks okay. It looks like the B-list Jack, where you're not allowed to use his actual likeness, and there was that whole fiasco where when they showed these off, they actually showed the picture of a cosplayer who looked, you know, sort of similar to Jack. He had the same hair, but did they use his I don't know, but it doesn't look as bad as Rocky's, but it's not perfect, but, you know. At least it's not Rocky's. Looking good, Rocky? Nope. As for the figure itself, I think this is solid. I'm gonna be honest, it's probably my least favorite of the wave, not because I don't like SPD Red or his suit, but I think I have the most little nitpicks about it. Mainly the helmet, which I think is solidly done, but feels a little bit fatter than it should be. It might just be me, but I feel like there's a little bit more of a balance, and there's something off about it for me personally. And then, like, his neck looks a little more squat than it should. Not Babu, but, like, squat. Especially since I feel like when you see the suit actor, his neck is a little bit longer in the Sentai footage. So there's just something about the general head-neck area that's off-putting. Everything else is pretty solid, though. You know, the colors, the cloth designs, all that. The articulation's the same. Really neat here, you get both components of his blaster combined, but they can also separate, and you can actually fully separate that. I didn't mean to do that. But you can separate them into their individual components. Warning, this does do that. It's not broken, though. You just have to reattach it to the hinge, and it has a little hinge. But it's cool that you have the option to do both, and they actually combine. When you're doing it, I recommend plugging this part in first, where this little hole is, and actually plug that in first, and then sort of seesaw it in there. But yeah, that's really neat. I really appreciate that you can do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at comparison to him for previous releases. Now for our SPD Reds, the first thing I actually noticed was how much of a darker color the Lightning Collection one is compared to the other ones, which is just kind of noticeable. But you do have the figure art here, which I think honestly looks a little bit too slender to me. I feel like the perfect proportions for this guy's helmet are somewhere between this guy's and the Lightning Collection one. His is just a little bit too slender, I think, a little bit too skinny, but he's got the correct neck proportion. And then here you have the Action Hero line from, was it Super Mega Force, which is definitely a weird release. I think it had one of the weirdest helmet sculpts. I actually forgot to grab the main SPD 2010 figure, so I'll try to put up a little comparison in the right-hand corner of that from a retro review, but needless to say, this guy's an upgrade from that as well. Alright, last but certainly not least, the one I was looking forward to the most because this is one of my all-time favorite Sentai Ranger suit designs, all-time favorite Sentai villain, Cybervillian Blaze, aka Enter from Go Busters. I really love this figure. It's not perfect like all the other ones, but I think they did a pretty good job. I think the head sculpt is really, really well done. I think the proportions look good, the colors look good. This maybe could have been amped up a little bit more to the visor look it has in the show, but still pretty solid. I think the proportions with the chest piece here are the same. Same articulation as always, but you might have some minor hindrances with this, but not really because it's soft plastic. And it's got that same sort of like backpacky feel as the regular figures, but because it's a solid piece and not just two backpack straps, it stays on there nicely. The silver paint here also shines nicely. You got his little morpher device on the side there, which is actually fully detailed, unlike the main release, if I can ever get the camera to focus on it. There we go. So there's that. And no loose joint problems, and overall, I just think it's a really nice looking figure. They got the color right, the proportions right, I'm really happy with it. Accessories wise, he includes his blade here, which I honestly can't remember if it was in Go Busters, but it was featured quite a bit in the Beast Morphers series. So you have that, which is neat. You have two extra closed fist hands, you have that lightning effect part I talked about earlier, and then a neat addition here, let's set him. He's gonna fall down, so I'm just gonna lie him down. A neat addition here is you have his little briefcase here, so you can do Salaryman Blaze poses. So that's really neat, and not only that, but it opens up and it says virus loading. This is the device he uses to create the quote-unquote monsters or robots, Giga Drones in the series. That's a really neat and unique accessory. And of course, he does come with a civilian head, which allows you to do cool what-if stuff like this. Putting Blaze's head on the Red Ranger body. Since he was originally supposed to be the Red Ranger, we also got to see that what-if scenario in Season 1. I think it's one of the stronger head sculpts of this line. It looks pretty accurate, while also looking like a what-if Super Saiyan live-action Gohan. But they did a pretty good job on it, and I really like being able to do this. Now let's just quickly go and compare it to its only other comparison figure. Alright, and then Blaze only has really one other figure to compare it to at the moment outside of the large-scale Nutcracker figures or the little Micro Morphins guy, but that, you know, really doesn't count. This is the primary comparison you'll want, and I think this is a clear superior figure. If you're a Blaze or Enter fan, I think it's absolutely the best option. Better articulation, better proportion, better details, but this was honestly a decent figure for the price points, and I do want to give props to the basic line for being pretty solid figures for half the price. But if you want to go for the best, definitely the Lightning Collection version. Alright, and that is about it. Overall, I think we have ourselves another solid wave here. Definitely not perfect, definitely some nitpicks here and there. Like I said with SPD Red's helmet sculpt, some of the accessory choices, little nitpicks here and there. Rocky's head, if you can call it that. It's also kind of a weird wave. It feels like the B-Team wave. Like, I guess the letter B is just in my head because, like, B Squad, Blaze, these guys are kind of like the more B Rangers, I guess. I don't know, but there's just something about it that feels more like a B-Team wave. But I think that you owe it to yourself to at least check some of these out if you're a fan of any of these characters or their suits. Because even though it's not perfect like most waves of the Lightning Collection, these are pretty solid figures, and for the most part, I'm happy with all of them. Anyway, that's about it for this time. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can get the notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.